Hello and welcome to the Rank and Flank podcast. My name is Finton. These are my co-hosts AJ.
Hello.
And Tim.
Hello.
Today we're going to be talking about
Ancient spirits of evil, transform this podcast into Rank and Flank, the ever-recording.
we're going to be talking about the Tomb Kings of Khemri. Just a general army overview, looking into their history of their models and
A faction focus.
a faction focus. Yes, that's the
there you
word.
go. Yeah, I like that.
The thing we
phrase.
came up with.
That was Tim's idea. I think it's a good. It's a good summary of it.
In this faction focus, we're going to be talking about how the Tomb Kings play on tabletop, as well as the history of their models and a bit of their lore of the faction and what they are in the Warhammer world, what they are in real life, and what they are on the tabletop.
Sounds good.
To kick things off, we're going to look at some of the latest announcements for Old World in the Town Crier. So, there have been a lot of announcements after a month of nothing. We've gotten a whole bunch of model announcements for Tomb Kings of Bretonnia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's announcements. It kind of feels a bit like, hey, we're announcing that we're going to announce stuff later, and then later you get the announcement. It's like, hey, you know that announcement we said we were going to do? Here it is. We're announcing it again. Oh, but you have to wait. You can only pre-order it. You know, it's like they kind of
And make sure to pay us money on the way.
right. They build it up a lot. But the good news is a whole bunch of models are coming out. So,
Yep.
well, let's go through them real quick.
Yeah, so we've got I think one of the only new models is the Tomb King on Necrolith Bone Dragon, which is very similar to the one in the starter set, but instead of a Lich Priest, it's got a Tomb King on top who's got his kind of little palanquin on the top.
Is that a separate model, or is it just a kit that you can build in two different ways?
That's a great question. I think that it
think
might
it's a kit.
be a kit.
I think it's a kit, but it does look cool with the Tomb King on the top, I have to say. I think it's a great looking model altogether, right? I mean,
Yeah. Nice big crocodile dragon.
he is a crocodile dragon, isn't he? Got that wide sort of mouth and well, you know, bony wings. Of course he can fly, even though he's got no actual flapping power.
The Necrosphinx can fly. Like, I don't know what you expect from this army.
I mean, flying?
After that is Nakaf, Emissary of Cetra, who I've never actually seen the model of. I always assumed he was kind of like a standard battle standard bearer from his rules. But he's got a big scroll that he's standing on top of, it looks like.
No, he's standing on a rock, and he has to stand on the rock because the scroll is too long,
Right.
and needs to go lower than his feet.
And this is, of course, the scroll containing all of Cetra's titles.
That's right, because he's the herald.
Yep,
That makes sense. And we already read a whole bunch of Cetra's titles last time.
we did. We don't have any more for you.
Well, we might have to ad-lib a few more a bit later.
We might need
The
to.
namer of tunes,
And very nice model in the calf.
corrector of prices.
Eater of hamburgers.
After the calf, we've got some of the returning skeleton warriors and skeleton bowmen in their plastics.
Fantastic.
Very nice old school skeleton models.
Yes, these look lovely, all ranked up. You know, I like the paint job that they've done on them as well, and it really, you know, it's all earth tones except for the shield, which is this kind of bright turquoise blue. I think that's a really great way to do skeletons in general. You know, pick one color.
The exciting part isn't the skeleton. No, it's the really nice plank of wood he's got.
Well, at the end of the day, you're kind of limited on your color choices for skeletons, right? It's like, bone. What about a nice ivory? Perhaps maybe a fossilized color? I
Maybe
don't know.
off-white.
Yeah.
And going along with the foot variants of each of the skeleton troops, there's also the mounted ones in the skeleton horsemen and skeleton horse archers.
Yes. Every time I see skeletons, it just makes me want to say, nah, He-Man. I can't help it.
I absolutely want to see a Skeletor Lich Priest at some point.
Oh, I'm sure it's been done.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it really just lends itself to it, doesn't it? Anyway.
Perfectly. I think one of the more iconic units of the Tomb Kings, definitely. Their chariots are also re-releasing.
Yep. I'm not a huge fan of chariots in general, but they do look nice.
These are definitely some of the nicer chariots. I like how they've got the like historical vibe to them rather than the cart pulled by pigs that Chaos has a lot of the time.
Right. Right. They do look like they could actually have existed.
Yeah. And on the nicest chariot of all is Cetra in metal.
Oh, yeah. So he's coming out in metal again?
Yes, he is, apparently. Along with Prince Apophis and the Necrotect.
Now, geez, cool.
Oh, sorry, that's not Cetra. That's a Tomb King on a chariot. Very different than Cetra.
Okay.
He has
Phew.
2 fewer horses.
No, yes, he's nowhere near wide enough. But he's just a regular Tomb King. Okay, so that makes more sense. He's not the Tomb King.
He's not the imperishable, no.
No. I mean, they must be re-releasing Cetra because he's in the Arcane Journal.
Must be, yeah.
But he hasn't been announced yet. So rewind that and we'll just not... yeah. Okay, it's as if that never happened.
Never.
Yeah, don't diss Cetra, man.
Yeah.
And wrapping up the Tomb King section, we've got some nice resins. Resin remasters, actually, as they're called. They're returning in Forge World resin rather than Finecast. Thank God. So we've got the Screaming Skull Catapult, the Tomb Scorpion on its weird, extra wide base, and Carrions.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We kind of glossed over in the Cetra confusion that Prince Apophis and the Necrotect are being released. I love the Prince Apophis model because he's all made up of scarab beetles.
Yep, that is also I don't think he's ever been effective in any edition of Warhammer, but he's such a cool model.
He is a cool model, and we'll talk about whether we think he's effective a bit later in the Art of War.
Yes, absolutely.
You just want to see him on the table for the cool model, though, regardless of how effective he is.
Yeah, and then he gets shot. The Bretonnians also are seeing some re-releases.
Yep. Starting with the Knights of the Realm on foot. How about I cover the Bretonnians?
Sure, Mr. Bretonnian player.
Well, you're a Bretonnian wannabe player, maybe.
French were too expensive for you.
So, yep, they got Knights of the Realm on foot, which I don't think did they ever release those before? I think that's new. I
think these are new, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the Lord with the Great Weapon who looks awfully like Sean Bean in my head, which means he's going to die in every
game.
Every game.
Not necessarily. If he's the Sean Bean who played Sharp,
That's true.
then he'll be kept alive by his crew.
He couldn't possibly be that Sean Bean, though, because A, that Sean Bean wasn't noble, and B, that Sean Bean used a missile weapon, and those two things are just like putting you right out.
He did in
the
battle,
Bretonnian army.
however, he did a lot of dueling
He did do a lot of dueling.
in France and in England.
And his best mate was Irish.
That's true.
Anyway, sorry, we're talking about
Yeah.
Sharp. So other stuff that's coming back, there's a kit for building Knights of the Realm / Knights Errant. As best I can tell, the only difference is the Knights Errant don't like to wear their helmets. And of course, they're bringing back the famous trebuchet, the field trebuchet, which is, I think, coming out in...
Yeah, it's in Forge World resin.
Yeah. Remastered for easier construction. So that's probably good because, as I recall, that thing was a pain in the neck. It was made in metal and you had to pin it.
Would have been easier just to build an actual trebuchet.
Full size.
Lighter, too.
And then they've got a bunch of returning medals.
Questing Knights, the command of the Questing Knights.
Yep.
We've got Squires, which are interesting, and some Squire command. These are foot Squires, yeah.
Yep. Those are one step up from your peasant bowmen.
The men-at-arms, yeah. And then we've got the Prophetess of the Lady, both on foot and on a horse.
Yep.
And the Green Knight.
Yay, the Green Knight.
Fantastic.
But as we know, he got killed by Cetra.
So horribly.
So the prophetess, I'm not a fan of that model, the one on the horse. She's got a very derpy hat. I just don't like derpy hats. Maybe that's my own bias. I like the one on foot, though. She looks awesome. And I think they're bringing out a new sorceress on a new damsel on a...
There was a damsel on a, I think it was a Pegasus.
Unicorn?
Unicorn, yeah.
Yeah. She looks amazing.
She was a named character, actually.
Yeah, Elise Duchard, I think her name is. So I imagine we'll see more of her than we'll see of this prophetess. But yeah, that's all the new releases that have been announced
For Old World, yeah.
for Old World. And we're still waiting for
Anything on Orcs and Goblins?
further news on the Orcs and Goblins. Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said, we announced that we're going to announce this later.
Right.
They still haven't announced it.
Yeah, so let's wait for that announcement again. I'm not
Yay,
sure.
waiting.
Where's my orcs? Where's the boys? Give it back.
So one other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that they have released some art prints featuring the covers of the old edition Warhammer Armies books. So some of those pieces of art are, they're pretty cool, but they're mostly very nostalgic. So, if you played a lot of, I think these are the 7th ed.
Most of them are 7th ed. There's 2
and
6th
7th
ed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
They're also doing that for 40k, which are very pretty.
maybe the 6th ed, I'm not sure. But yeah, they're really pretty. I've never ordered a piece of art from Games Workshop, but
Don't plan to.
I do like seeing them. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all the new releases.
Yep. Orcs sometime.
The hobby horse.
Alrighty. So on the topic of models, I think we should move into the hobby horse now.
Nay. Sorry.
It'd be rattle, I think, wouldn't it? All things considered.
True.
Indeed.
Yes, what noise does a undead horse make?
Good question.
Send your
think-
answers.
I think the noise would actually be something along the lines of some people screaming,
Probably.
because that's the noise that it causes.
Yes,
When you-
It does cause fear.
it does.
Anyway, Tim, I believe you've prepared some things to talk
I
about.
have, yeah. What I'd like you to do is to cast your mind back. Right. And it's going to be 1988.
Right, I'm not alive.
Doing non-alive.
Is
If we go back in time, right, which I'm hoping that the
You said
sound
cast my
effect...
mind back. That's different.
it's true.
Sam Beckett did it.
See,
You don't know who
see,
he is neither.
he's not old enough to know who that is.
Ben Sung,
No,
Marty McFly.
Oh, yeah.
he knows Marty McFly.
Right. He's from...
He was in a Western, right?
Yeah, he looks a lot like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, this ruined my time travel effects. You've got 3 months painting the TARDIS.
Damn it. Not again.
All right.
The inside?
No, the out.
Okay.
Yep.
The outside's a lot bigger than it appears when you start painting it as well.
Okay.
Yeah. We have 3 months of it. Different shades of blue.
Stay on target,
Right.
you guys.
Anyway, one of the first boxed sets ever for Warhammer was the plastic skeleton horde box. And this had a good number of skeleton infantry, chariots, and horsemen
Okay.
for a tenner.
Whoa. This was 1988.
This was 1988, so you got basically a skeleton army
For a tenner.
for a tenner. Of course, it rised up to like 11.99 and 13.72 or whatever in the years, but this is probably the foundation of a lot of people's collections from back then.
Wow.
This was a time where Warhammer 3rd edition was out, And I'm not going to say too much about 3rd edition because I don't believe this particular incarnation of me played it.
I did play 3rd edition.
You did.
And that was the edition that was, it only came in a book form.
Yeah.
But it also came with colored paper at the back where you could, that had illustrations of models so that you could cut them out to make paper models to play with in case you didn't have plastic ones, or sorry, metal ones.
So moving up to 4th edition, which was the first box set edition, Warhammer Armies, as it was known then, had a book simply called Undead.
Yes, I
This
remember that.
was released in 1994. If you are a collector, right, there was a misprint on the first printing of that book on the back cover, and it, instead of saying special rules, it said rules special.
Okay.
Right?
Only real fans have the rules special book.
Absolutely.
So that's only in like the first printing.
Yes.
So you can tell if you've got the, you can tell if you've got the special edition if you happen to have.
You mean the edition special?
the edition?
Absolutely.
So hang on, I just want to go back to the 1988. So I pulled up the Citadel Miniatures catalog from 1988 just to give an idea of some other things that were available at that time. So I've mentioned them before, Ruglud's Armored Orcs, only because they were my first ever box set.
Yep.
But you could buy Chaos Dwarf Petard and Bazooka.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen the Petard, but that's kind of cool. So if you don't know what a Petard is, it is it's a kind of a cup-shaped bomb that you put on a door of a castle, and then the charge explodes and blows the bloody doors off.
It's a medieval shaped charge.
It is a medieval shaped charge. Chaos Snake Men were also available as part of the Realms of Chaos, and you could still buy Femir in the monsters.
We don't talk
section.
about the female.
Yeah. So just they also had a whole section called Dragons. You could buy a Toad Dragon, a Lava Dragon, a Nightmare Dragon, a Homed Dragon.
Homed?
Does he
Is
live
it inside a house?
He lives in a little house. I'm kind of curious.
I'm
What is it?
imagining now we've got like a house
I think it's
with a dragon
horned,
head.
a horned dragon. There we go. Just a misprint.
Oh, how boring.
How boring.
I wanted a dragon with its head sticking out of a house and wings at the sides.
Lots of different dragons, all in metal, all I'm sure a nightmare to put together. Sorry, that was 1988. Now you can bring us forward.
No, why not? We're going to have the whole 80s Citadel Miniatures experience,
Yeah.
complete with 3 rhinos in one box set.
Oh my goodness.
The Christmas Space Marines.
The crazy thing is, in inflation, it's not even gone up that much. Like, it's £33 would be £10 back then, in 1988, according to the first result on Google.
Yeah. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, definitely doesn't. But that is, £33 is not a lot of money for, a whole skeleton army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty ridiculous.
Well, they were also still. Oh, there's the Skeleton Horde box set. They were also selling on the same page in the Citadel catalog. Psychostyrene dwarfs. Psychostyrene is what they call their plastic. But you could also buy a sprue of Daleks and Cybermen.
Oh, yeah.
And what else have we got?
Judge Dredd.
There's no Judge Dredd in this particular catalog that I can see.
It's a good Judge Dredd model, though. I've seen it.
But they do have Eternal Champion. So the
Michael Moorcock.
the Michael Moorcock Elric books. Yeah, they had stuff for that. So anyway, that is our long trip down memory lane. I'm sorry. It was a really interesting
If anyone
aside.
finds this interesting, we will do.
I found it interesting.
I do as well, but I'm talking to
That's
the
two-
person listening.
That's 2/3 of the podcast right there. We get to talk about whatever the heck we want.
Absolutely. But
I'm just here for the ride.
I think if anyone listening wants us to do a early 80s or late 80s or
Yeah.
just waffle about Old Hammer,
Yes, we will. Absolutely, we will.
Next episode of Rank and Flank featuring 0 ranks and flanks, waffle about Oldhammer for 2 hours.
Right.
All right. 1994 edition special.
I can't top anything
from there.
So what? For anyone who wasn't around back then or needs a bit more info, what Warhammer was doing at the time was going from a rule book and a book of army lists to individual army books. And the Undead was one of those armies, funnily enough. Inside that book were the foundations of what is now known as Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts. It used a very similar system to what we have now. So there was points and magic items. A couple of interesting points is that dark magic was taught to Kemrian men by the Dark Elves.
Ah.
That's an interesting bit of lore there.
Right. It's still relevant if you actually have a look in the current rulebook. However, what is interesting is the original dark magic cards. Now, these were actual playing cards that you'd have with the spells written on them. 3 of them were necromancy, and the other 7 were general dark magic. So
weren't they like almost like punch cards? I think they came in the if I remember rightly, they came in a square battle magic box.
Yeah, there was a whole supplement for Warhammer which was magic cards.
Yes.
I think it launched another game by another company, but
so I'm sorry, keep going. Yeah. Have you got more about 1994?
Absolutely.
All right, keep going. Because I brought up the catalog as well, just to
throw random stuff. Right.
Catalog through time.
So pretty much the whole Warhammer Undead problem was started by the Dark Elves just being funny.
So they taught
Kemrian men
the dark magic, which allowed them then to
create necromancy
and do the whole undead shuffle.
Do the whole undead shuffle, the Michael's Dance Macabre, as it's known. Sorry, Van Hell, that should be. Now, eventually...
I'm pretty sure there is a character named Michael Jackson in Warhammer lore.
If you go back to the 80s, they did release a miniature. It's probably a little bit insensitive, considering that at the time, I think in the early 80s, Michael Jackson was involved in a fire.
Right.
And suffered some quite serious burns.
That's right.
So one of the Citadel casters, whose name that I probably won't mention,
shall remain nameless,
created a skeleton whose head was on fire.
And named him Michael Jackson?
Well, it was Mikhail Jackson.
Yes.
So he was kind of vaguely from somewhere in the Empire. But...
okay.
Resisting the urge to just do a big Michael Jackson ow.
Well,
should never resist that urge. Just lean into it.
I can't imagine it was a really good day to be Michael Jackson in the 80s at the time. With there was a lot of hairspray and product that caught fire. He was doing the Pepsi advert. So, but Games Workshop is very much known for satire.
Taking the piss.
Satire that is then taken way too seriously by people who don't know what satire is.
Absolutely.
That's also true.
But eventually there was another supplement called Arcane Magic, and necromancers could use a full necromancy deck rather than having to rely on just dark magic. Now, why this is vaguely relevant, because it kind of isn't, is that... you had 3 spells out of the whole dark magic deck that were relevant to your army, and you didn't have a great chance of picking those spells at the start of the battle unless you had lots of wizards.
Right.
Interestingly enough, Cetra was in that Undead book alongside Arcane the Black and Nagash himself.
In his pajamas.
Well,
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the catalog. I see Nagash in there. I see Dieter Helsnicht.
Yep.
Krell. So he's not mentioned in the. Maybe let me have a look here. There's the Lich King's Chariot.
Should be Arcan the Black.
And I don't know that Arcan is in the 94 catalog. He might not have appeared until 95, so maybe I'll have
Lich King's Chariot.
Lich King's Chariot. There's Mummies.
Mummies Alive.
Yeah, Mummies. Skeleton Warriors, Carrion, and Undead. Just a general Undead Chariot, which is
the bone one from the 80s.
The bone one, yeah. The horses look remarkably similar. The skeletons look remarkably similar. They've just updated the look for as you were saying.
Chariots don't have skeletons.
And Nagash looks like...
Oh, he's very...
Very strange.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people took the mickey out of the model now, but at the time, it was quite amazing. I think... I'm going to say no one hated it, but the amount of people who would take the mickey out of it were in a minority. And that voice seems to have steamrolled out of control, that now somehow this model is now the bane of your existence.
Because a lot of people don't like how the older models look, and Nagash exemplifies that in a lot of ways.
I think the real problem was the paint job that became kind of the advertising, because it was very stark.
It was very synonymous with the model. He was wearing bright purple.
Bright purple, yeah. And it just kind of...
On the light blue background with the goblin green base.
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, though, I think the entire Undead range in that publication was wearing very bright colours, goblin green bases.
Yep. Welcome to the mid-90s.
It was an interesting time.
Yeah.
I think there was an interesting thing about this book in particular is that Setro was listed as the Tomb King of Khemri. Like, there wasn't a concept of Tomb Kings. He was just the single Tomb King.
That's because Setro rules!
He does not serve.
That's right. And the Screaming Skull Catapult was called the Skull Chucker.
Feels a bit more orky.
It does. Anyway, please continue, Tim. This is a great...
That was a good set of models, to be fair. It kind of built on that original skeleton box set. Not to say that there wasn't metal models around at the time, but bringing out some new ones, some new vampires, mummies.
I mean, just to look at the 94 catalog, there's more entries for Undead than any other army, including Space Marines.
Well,
Space Marines weren't really the powerhouse they were today.
Yes, right. Back in the 90s, more people played Fantasy than played 40k.
Yeah. But by this time, 2nd edition was out, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that explains why.
Yes.
I think 40k really took off with 3rd edition when it became slightly less off-the-walls crazy and slightly more grimdark and serious.
Perhaps. I think that's
a topic for another time.
Indeed. Another podcast.
So we've got two more podcasts lined
Just
up.
make notes. Yeah, here we go.
So 40k on the Rank and Flank podcast and crazy 80s miniatures.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole point of talking about the Undead book is that for anyone who's collecting it at the time, at some point in the extreme late 90s, your army was cut in half. And you either now had 2 armies, 1.5 armies, however you want to look at it. Shit happened, man.
You had to pick a direction.
Absolutely. If you can cue some evil laughter. The Vampire Counts was the first of a series of books. One of them was called, funnily enough, Vampire Counts. That was for Warhammer 5th edition. You could also continue using your 4th edition book as well in 5th edition. No one would stop you. However, the split caused a lot of people to continue to play Vampire Counts because, one, Tomb Kings were in a White Dwarf.
Yep.
And as an army list. And all of the very powerful stuff in your Undead army was put into Vampire Counts. So at the time, vampires were incredibly powerful. It was one of the more powerful models that you could have in the army, although necromancers at the time were pretty tanky as well. It was the first book to introduce things like the bloodlines.
The von Karsteins, I think.
There was von Karstein, the blood dragons, and loads of other stuff for another podcast.
Yep.
Wraiths, wights, and zombies, and introduced the Black Coach.
Yep.
So
I think this was 99, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. I was partying with Prince at the time. Remember that year very vaguely. So what Vampire Counts lost was chariots, but they did get a Black Coach.
Yes.
So moving into the Tomb Kings, there was one White Dwarf article, kept archers, because vampires lost them, catapults, kept liches in a sense, although they had changed from the ethereal, ghostly, more sort of D&D style, all-powerful lich to a scary sort of mummy dude.
Yep.
Funnily enough, mummies moved over to the Tomb Kings, although we still can't field units of them. These are now characters, although in a sense you could imagine that your Tomb Guard or other models, even in the background, as it says currently in Warhammer the Old World, the partially mummified remains.
So only in 4th edition could you run units of mummies, or could you never run units of mummies?
Up until 4th edition, you could have a unit of mummies, and you could also get characters.
Right.
Like a Tomb King.
But in 4th edition, you couldn't. Like in Warhammer Armies Undead, there was no mummies entry.
There was. There was in Warhammer Armies Undead.
Yes.
But in Tomb Kings, there isn't mummies.
Right.
Which is kind of weird, to be fair. But how the direction they took the army, it makes more sense that an entire army of spearmen, archers, catapults and stuff, rather than an evil necromancer has purchased and reanimated 15 guys from ancient Kemri or wherever in the old world.
Yeah.
And just said, hey guys, do you want to be in my army?
And they said nothing because they were skeletons.
Well, yeah.
They said, nah, He-Man.
Just imagining a low flyover of a unit of skeletons, and all you hear is nah, nah, nah.
Well, would that make He-Man Sigmar
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
the equivalent of?
I think
Because he's a barbarian.
It's true.
Don't know if
Does he ever become king? Who knows? No, it can't possibly be because he's got a sword and not a hammer.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, meanwhile, back in Plotland.
So, the Tomb Kings book came out for 6th edition in 2003.
Yep.
So 5 years after the split, we now have a full army book. Although that's not strictly true, there was the Ravening Hordes army list of 2000, which was part of the release of the 6th edition box set. So,
Yep. So I've got the 2004 catalog up here, and it has a whole section now about the Tomb Kings, including talking about their fighting style, like in the catalog, which is kind of cool.
that's nice.
So it says, no force in the Warhammer world relies as heavily on its characters as the Tomb King's army. So that was the first line. And the best two things to begin a Tomb King's army with are skeletons and some character models. So still true today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think by now, the new Skeletons box set were released. I think they were part of the Vampire Counts re-release. So our old skeleton horsemen, chariots and stuff had kind of been vanished.
Yep.
There was a new chunkier models.
I have that very battalion right here. It's 2 regiments of skeleton warriors, 3 chariots, and 8 horsemen.
And are these the ones that were just re-released?
They look very similar to them and complete with bright blue paint job.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, they were definitely chunkier. One of the complaints some people had about the very nostalgic 80s box set was that it very flimsy skeleton models.
Oh yeah.
You kind of look at them and they break. However, there was a necromantic potion called Liquid Poly. Which,
Arise.
Absolutely.
I'm experiencing a bit of the look at them and they break thing with my 3D printed Tomb Kings now. Resin is not kind to thin joints.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But this is where we first get the Cetra
With this big chariot of the gods.
big chariot, right?
Although there was Arcan the Black.
Before that.
Yes. He had a better... his chariot could fly.
Yeah.
Archon's lame.
Flying chariot. Fine.
Wait until Arcan the Black hears of this. Silence.
Cetra is a much cooler character.
He is. Arcan's pretty... I like Arcan. Like, don't they... I think Arcan was even in the end times. Like,
Yeah, he was one of the Mortarks of Nagash.
yeah.
He was cooler Manfred.
Yeah, he's been around a lot longer.
Yeah,
And,
a couple thousand years longer.
Yeah. And
He's definitely like... No, I don't think any of the Tomb Kings named characters of previous editions anyway are necessarily bad. It's just that Cetra trumps them all because he's Cetra.
Because Cetra rules.
yeah, Cetra rule. Where does Cetra rule exactly?
The Kingdom of Khemri.
Camry.
All of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was the greatest king of all of Nehekara ever.
Yeah, and so, we can get to that in a minute. Keep going
Yeah.
with this because this is super fascinating.
Right, so just to talk about the new skeletons, the new skeletons.
Yes.
They're the current skeletons. They,
2000. So this is 2004 we're at, right? 20
at
years
some
ago.
point in the late 90s, the extreme late 90s, those skeletons were released as part of the Vampire Counts. These
Right.
extra chunky with the skull sheen fields.
Yeah.
They used the same skeletons for the Tomb Kings, but a different set of shields
Yes.
and
I remember.
pieces.
Pretty much what they are now, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's 100% the same models. They do have the heroic scale as opposed to the original 28mm. So you've got chunkier heads, you've got chunkier weapons. They are still great models in general. A lot of people, including myself, have bought skeletons just so you have access to skulls for other armies.
Sure.
And it is also a backdoor into collecting undead, so watch out, children. You start out collecting stuff for your banner pole, next thing you know, you're in league with Nagash.
Skeletons are a gateway drug, as they say.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings us to the thing that you were looking at, which is the chariots,
Yep.
the other, and the horsemen, and all the Khemri battalion box.
Yeah, and it's so there's the battalion box, the Casket of Souls. I think is from around then as well.
Yep.
And I'm seeing also.
Would that be when Grand Hierophant Katep released as well then? Or did he ever get a model?
I don't see that model, but I do see High Queen Khalida in
Oh,
here.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's a neat thing actually that they have that's been, I guess, been part of the Tomb Kings lore from the start, which is it's equally Tomb Queens.
Yeah.
It
As
just,
Lich Priestesses
right.
and all that stuff.
It just depends on who happens to be ruling at any particular time.
And they're all bones, so you can't really tell from a glance.
Yep.
Fair.
I wouldn't tell that to some of the...
I wouldn't say that to their face.
What face? They're bones.
All right, I'll let you say that. I'll be in the other room with the very long prayer book.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, you're quite right. It's kind of bringing it back to what I was saying about mummies, is that now that these are full-on characters and have names and titles, you can kind of see that their arrogance is definitely emphasised in the current edition, the Old World, and the absolute madness of it, where Tomb King would demand like a finest wine and a plate of figs regardless of the fact that you can't eat or drink it.
But I want it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to dirty my seat.
absolutely. But yeah, I think their split was that rather than splitting between, say, male and female, they would split between the royal bloodlines and everyone else.
Yep. Yep.
Most everyone else was, a mindless skeleton at this point, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone else kind of includes the entire planet that isn't one or two of the tomb kings and princes and princesses.
So the thing about that is that there's more than one or two. Like, there's
hundreds.
yes, there's hundreds, because each individual city-state had its own tomb king and
true.
accompanying royal people
Per generation.
per generation is the
And
big thing.
And there was for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Which is why there's so many of them.
And they all rise up at the same time and are like, what the fuck? Why are you doing all this terrible stuff to the kingdom that I built?
Yes.
So it's all old people getting mad at young people. Kids today, they don't know how good we had it back in the golden age of Cetra.
Yeah. So, sorry, just to talk more about the models that were available back then. That the Ushabti have appeared. The Tomb Guard have gotten a new box. The Carrion and the Tomb Scorpions, the Bone Giant, and now it's finally called the Screaming Skull Catapult, and I think it's the same one that they're re-releasing. So really the range that we're getting for Old World is from that year, right?
Yeah.
That set of releases, 2004.
Yes, from pretty much that era from 2003, 2004 onwards.
Yeah.
They've actually done quite a lot of work in making the army very Egyptian themed.
Yep.
It does look like somebody popped over to Egypt on the company's dime
Yeah.
and had a look round some tombs,
Yep.
possibly raised a couple of
Raised a couple of skeletons. Well, maybe because it was like early 2000s, there was this new thing called the World Wide Web, and they might have been able to do a bit of research on that.
There is that, but although
They might have had a modem.
I've seen a white dwarf, and somebody from the Games Workshop Studios had just gotten back from Egypt.
Oh, legit? All right.
Absolutely. I don't recall the white dwarf number off the top of my head, but it did happen. And the other army list that was produced around that time was Necrons.
Yeah. Well, clearly that trip paid off.
Absolutely, it was. So probably somebody somewhere, and I'm not saying any names, but probably put down as a business expense a trip to Egypt, and then probably had to hastily write 2 army lists overnight.
These ones are skeletons. Oh, and these ones are skeletons, but metal.
Which is probably a better story than probably what actually happened. But yeah, I mean the older models were great, but they were very themed around death itself. If you look at say some of the paint jobs, it looks like it was a necromancy centric army.
Mm-hmm.
And these people would probably spend too much time around the graves, and they'd spent time painting their shields with skulls and bats and stuff like that, which is one interesting way of looking at the army. But I think you've got a very stronger theme with the Tomb Kings. You know where they come from, where they're about. And
They have thousands of years of history,
absolutely.
and every house has its own colors and symbology. It's not all about, look at us, we're dead, because they weren't dead for most of their existence.
Yeah.
Well, it is also, a clever way to, retool existing kits, right, to make a new feeling army. I mean, you don't have to start from scratch, like, because they launched around the same time as they, just a couple of years before, I guess they did the Tomb Kings was when they launched the Lizardmen for the first time, and that was a complete new army from scratch, right? Whereas with the Tomb Kings, it gave them, they kind of had a leg up because they were able to split the undead army into two.
Yeah, I mean, probably a lot of people at the time were using existing models to play vampire counts, and then possibly later on Tomb Kings, depending on how their model collection actually was. I think that might be guesswork here. I think a lot of people actually went with vampire counts because, one, they were first, and two, that they were what I'd call like the power army. They had a lot of strong stuff in there. Whereas I believe, correct me if I'm wrong later in the discussion, but Tomb Kings is more the tactical undead army. You've got a lot of options.
You have a shooting phase.
Yeah, yeah. There was carrion. There's things that can do stuff other than just charge in and hack people apart.
Yeah, well,
Vampire Counts had some stuff as well, but that's a topic for another episode.
It's definitely if you wanted a shooting phase, that's the big difference, right, between the two. You've got ranged options that aren't just down to your magic use.
And the ranged options aren't half bad.
Yeah, well, we'll get to those real soon.
Indeed.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about painting or?
Yeah, we can totally talk about painting them.
All right.
But I think that was really fascinating, right? To kind of talk about where did the army come from. So 2004, like when they did that range, like I don't think they released another Tomb King model until now.
I think they did a thing in 8th edition. They got a range refresh.
I don't think so.
Did they not get extra monsters? Like,
maybe. Like what did you think? They got the Necrosphinx.
Necrosphinx and Cambrian War Sphinx.
Yes, the Sphinxes came in the 8th edition.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's a very 8th edition thing.
It is big monsters on huge bases.
Yeah,
like the Arachnarok spider and
all of that things. Sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else? Because I was just looking through the army, like from the last time. I don't remember when the last catalog is, but the last catalog I have access to is a 2010 catalog, and it's the entire range of infantry and cavalry and chariots. There's
Tomb Scorpions. When did they come out?
Tomb Scorpions are in there too. Yep, and the swarms.
Yeah. Swarms were a thing for 3rd and 4th ed, and much like what's happened with the Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, swarms have become themed to specific armies. So,
yep,
you've got the good swarm, and then you got the tomb swarms.
So yeah, apart from the Sphinxes, I think
it was mostly done in 2004.
Yeah. The Necrosphinx is it I've never actually seen one. Is it? It's a big kit.
It's quite big. It's like the size of the Imperial Griffin.
Okay.
It's got big scything arms and teeny tiny little wings at the back of it.
Oh yes, I know the one now. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it on the table because in 8th edition, Tomb Kings.
It was one of the better things in Tomb Kings, actually.
Yeah, but the Tomb Kings army overall
it was terrible.
Was pretty weak, so it was hard for people to.
I remember playing them once in the last tournament of 8th edition.
All right, so before we get on to talking about tactics and all of that fun stuff, let's
talk about painting.
Talk about painting, yeah. Let's stick with the.
Is my mic on? I think it is.
Yeah.
Right. Your Dudes is a concept for people who collect armies and paint them and model them so they are within the defines of the game and its army list, but look nothing like anything that's been published.
Right.
So even if you were doing, say, Ultramarines, you'd even say, right, I'm doing a different company to, say, 2nd, and I'm naming my own characters. Going back to Tomb Kings for 6th edition, there's a very short paragraph in one of the margins about Barrow Kings.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So don't know if anyone out there knows what a barrow is, but that's where Celtic people would end up when they'd stop being alive. And
It's a teeny tiny tomb.
pretty much.
Well, and of course, kind of made famous by Tolkien, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And see, these dudes were, in a sense, you used the same army list, but you would model them how you liked. And if you had an older army, it's a way of kind of using that army without necessarily having to buy a whole load of new models, although I'm sure that Games Workshop and other people would definitely like you to
Keep buying models.
absolutely. Yeah. But I thought it was just an interesting idea that somewhere in the old world there's other ancient civilizations who come back to unlife who aren't vampires.
Yeah. In fact, they kind of hint a bit about that in the old world now,
Yeah.
like in the Arcane Journal and stuff. So that's interesting.
Yep. The other thing is probably a shout out to Ralpartha's old. Is it Ralpartha? Grenadier, the undead war mammoth.
Huh.
That's a very old metal model. Why I think it's relevant, other than it's an undead model, it's a skeleton elephant,
Skeleton.
right? With a haldar on the back of it,
Yeah.
and it did have classical era looking skeletons
Yes.
on it. So that's possibly one of the first Tomb King models outside of Citadel.
Depending on the size of base it would go on, it'd be perfect for Chemian War Sphinx.
Absolutely. Expect to see one soon.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah. It has kind of like a metal trunk.
Yeah.
On the front, and the howdah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. The howdah is kind of house shaped, and it's got two angry skeleton archers on the top of it, and a
Didn't really consider the trunk would need to be made metal because it's not got a trunk because it's flesh.
right. But you want it to look like a mammoth,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
put the.
Look a bit like a terrifying bug monster a bit without it.
It would.
I mean, there's a phrase the guy who taught me how to paint says, and which is, "Who cares? It's fantasy."
Yes.
It's true.
So it's quite possible that in one of these worlds you get a bone trunk.
Why not?
Or a bone chariot.
Absolutely. I believe that there was background to why there was bone chariots.
Oh yes.
Many thousands of years ago, the wild flesh chariot roamed the wastes of Kemri. But then the treachery of Nagash killed them all. And now they roam with skeletons upon their backs.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, that's canon now.
So it shall be written, so it shall be done.
Kind of want to see someone paint up some flesh chariots now.
Oh God.
All right. That's a story for when we do Chaos.
Yeah.
Right.
Nurgle flesh chariots.
I think we should do probably a shout out to Mantic for continuing the classical themed skeleton armies.
Yep.
They do have a model range out there, which a number of people probably own.
It fits in quite well with the GW ones from what I've seen.
Yeah, pretty much.
In a lot of cases, a skeleton is a skeleton is a skeleton.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. They're a slightly different size, but I think that's good because I think in real life, which we're always going to compare to Warhammer World 2 for some reason, having different sized people that are different.
Not everyone is 6 foot exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Mantic army, the skeletons are more clothed and less bone.
Yeah.
But sorry, go ahead.
They've done 2 versions. So their original version was based on their undead skeleton range and was a metal conversion kit. And I believe that people have stopped complaining to Mantic about the metal conversion kit on the plastic stuff. although I'm loath to dip my head into any forum and be proved wrong. But they've done now. Their range is, I think, it's full hard plastic,
Okay.
including skeletons, cavalry. The army list is similar, I would say. So
Yep.
if you have,
It is actually more like, I think it's more like, not it's more like the old undead army,
Yeah.
right? It's not very Tomb Kingy. It's
are we talking about the Empire of Dust?
Empire of Dust.
Empire of Dust.
No, I'm just
Have a
looking
look.
I'm just looking at the undead army.
Oh, their undead army is
Very vampire county.
It's similar to the Warhammer undead, but it does have vampires, mummies.
Empire of Dust.
But
Okay.
the Empire of Dust.
Yes. Okay. I've never seen this army.
Yep.
Very skeletal. Again, but I was right. They do still have more clothes on.
Yeah.
Less bone, more clothes.
Far
Well,
less scandalous, these romantic ones.
Well, so
You don't want your bones sticking out, trust
so
me.
you know that's a really good a good point. Good point though is, you know, we were talking. I don't know if we were recording when we were saying this, but it's like you're. Oh, wait, we were talking about the chariots, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the paint scheme. You can only paint the shield because everything else is going to be bone. Well, now if your guys have clothes on, you can still get that wonderful Skeletor look. But now you have something else to paint, and like the horses have barding of some kind. It looks like.
Yep.
So a little bit more
They've
choice.
got a distinct feel.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But they'd fit in just fine on tabletop if you wanted to have a slightly cheaper alternative to Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ones that you're looking at, these are the second version
Right.
of that army. The first one was the previous army that you were probably looking at, which was the undead, and that was a metal conversion kit.
Right. Okay.
And like I said, a lot of people took the internet to swear at Mantic about how difficult that kit was to put together.
The internet never shuts up when it comes to swearing at Mantic.
Well, pretty much. They get a lot of hate, but I just wanted to do a shout out because they've been keeping the classical themed army alive.
In a lot of cases, they've been keeping rank and flank alive.
Yeah.
For about 10 years, as have Oathmark, to be fair. And if anyone remembers Raven, please get in touch. It's been about 25 years since my last game. But,
You and the 5 other people who played the game.
it's a great game. All right. If I ever lose my mind, you'll probably find me playing it somewhere.
Raven Mad.
Absolutely.
Well done.
But the other shout out we've got to do is to War Games Atlantic, and I believe they've just released a comparably familiar unit of skeleton chariots, horsemen, and I believe they've also had for a while out now classical skeletons. Now, the reason I say classical rather than specifically Egyptian is that them, and also shout out to Warlord, because they have a similarly classic skeleton look.
Just all the big wargaming names that aren't Games Workshop.
Yep. 32 skeletons. This is the War Games Classic Fantasy, War Games Atlantic.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Now, why I say classic, have you guys seen Jason and the Argonauts?
Yes.
Yes.
So you'll
The
I know.
Ray Harryhausen.
yes,
I know the myth.
you know the myth, right?
There's a big difference. The movie. Go ahead. Go ahead.
A lot of these skeleton models that I've been talking about, including the original Citadel, the current Warlord.
Oh, is this the claymation one with all the big monsters in clay?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
I've seen that,
stop frame animation. Yeah.
See, before
CGI.
last summer.
In the beginning.
In a time before computers. Sorry.
Back when they had to expose chemicals to light and then dip them in other chemicals 5 times and dry them for a really long time in order to get a severely degraded quality of image.
Yep.
So one of the
The
first
good old days.
Stay on target.
Right. Stay on target. Right. There was a sequence in that movie, and a particularly bearded sorcerer was annoyed with the heroes and summoned what he called the Children of the Hydra's Teeth.
Right. That's what he called them. I remember.
And he cast a spell using the Hydra's teeth, and where each one fell, up popped a skeleton.
Up popped the skeleton.
And
Yeah.
this is one of the first. It's stop motion animation, but it's one of the first sequences of battle with humans and skeletons.
Yes.
And a lot of these box sets pay reference to that very specific. I think it's like 15 minutes of movie time.
The Warlord games is even called Children of the Hydra's Teeth.
Absolutely.
Skeleton Host. And for let's see, this has got archers. It's got sword.
Has it got the sorcerer
Sword
there?
and shield. Yeah, it's got a sword. It's got the bearded sorcerer, and he's got a handful of Hydra's teeth.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, you get 90 plastic skeleton warriors.
If only they were clay.
And the necromancer. You know what? For €70, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone other than Games Workshop has reasonable prices.
No, I think.
I mean, I love this game. It's great.
If you're listening, I didn't say that.
Correct, I did. I buy models.
But at the time, it was very contemporary. So these movies would have been on, say, on bank holidays or Christmas.
Yep. Yep.
And
I loved it as a kid.
Yeah.
That and Sinbad, and there was a bunch of others. Jason and the Argonauts, and there was Sinbad, and the third one was the Perseus legend.
The Golden Fleece?
Clash of the Titans.
Clash of the Titans, yeah.
Clash of the Titans, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I haven't seen any of these, but I've seen a lot of references to them because they're very famous classic cinema.
Oh, they're great. Like, this was the only way to get something that was not, in my mind, super boring and grown up. You know?
Oh, look, two people talking in a room. How boring.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, there wasn't a hell of a lot of fantasy movies around at the time. I mean,
Right.
At the moment, we are spoiled. We've got series, there's movies.
We've been spoiled ever since Lord of the Rings came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the nerds grew up and got jobs in
In making more nerd
movies.
things.
Yeah, exactly.
Foster the next generation.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Right. So, how to paint your skeletons?
Step
With
one.
me, in the black. Right. So, again, going back in time, there's an article in White Dwarf number 142, which has an undead army, and it talks about painting the skeletons, among other things. Now, why a lot of people really enjoy painting and collecting skeletons, because you can get an army on the table in no time at all.
Right.
So, funnily enough, you start with a white undercoat. Now, this guide is probably not that relevant anymore because these paints don't exist unless Nostalgia 88 paint range produces inks. Yes, they are a thing. I didn't just make it up.
And bone spray didn't exist at this time?
Bones, you couldn't even get undercoat spray from
Oh,
anywhere.
wow.
This, you bought car primer.
Right.
And we lived in shoebox. And we
Had to lick road clean with tongue.
had to spray our models with a brush. And we had to go down separate shop to buy liquid poly
Yeah.
because it weren't available. And,
Anyway.
right, so you had a white undercoat. You had 2 parts yellow and 2 parts brown ink to 1 part water.
Okay.
Right?
2 parts yellow,
2
2 parts brown ink, and 1 part water.
water.
Okay, so you've got this kind of muddy, liquidy mix.
Yep, and then you put that over your white undercoated skeletons.
Boom, done.
No.
Dang.
Well, yeah, if you
This
want.
is not the era of contrast paints.
This is, well,
Well, that's pretty close, though.
It is, yeah.
That's the thing. You're mixing down your paint. You've added an ink.
Yep.
So you've created this medium that's going to soak to all the crevices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And leave the surfaces. I mean, not white, but relatively light.
yeah.
Bony, one might say.
it got a very dark
Right.
and yellowy brown.
Yep.
And then they suggested to dry brush with orc brown, which was a very light leathery brown.
Yep.
Mix in bleached bone,
Yep.
Can't guess what color that is.
and kind of your dry brush. You can do several dry brushes from orc brown all the way up to bleached bone, and then maybe up to skull white, depending on
Yep.
how bright you want your bones.
Right.
How bleached, one might say.
Yeah.
Now, you could theoretically, as you say, just paint, do the white undercoat and the brown ink, because that would be a very dark bone. Perhaps it's been gnawed on for a bit, under the earth for a couple of 100 years will do that to your bones.
Yep.
Whereas, if you have a active ghoul community who, as you know, provide a bone polishing service, provided that they get fresh corpse meat, that gives you a nice shiny, like that kind of bleached bone to skull white look to them. Ding.
They're the ones that kind of sheen things up with some Aquafresh. It's like just put it right on the top of the dome there and shine up the skull.
That would probably work.
Minty white skulls. Anyway.
I think if you looked in the Blood Bowl books, there'd probably be a number of legit Games Workshop approved companies for
Yep.
bone polishing. But pretty much when it comes to the colour of your bone, you've got a good range you could put in there.
Yep.
Not everything has to be as sparkling as it could be.
Right.
Although, to be fair to anyone who works in production, the sort of bleached bone, whatever they call it now, standard, does stand out better. You can actually tell what it is you're looking at. Whereas, say, in the reality of the Warhammer world,
Right.
it wouldn't be unusual to, say, even have black as bone. You could have a battle that took place, a wizard went a bit crazy.
Burnt all the skeletons and they got back up again.
Absolutely.
That'd be quite a cool armory.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have like black. You could even have a kind of circle of black, as if
Yeah. Taking a flaming arrow to the heart or something.
yeah, or
Can you imagine, like, you took a fireball to the center of the unit?
yeah,
I seem to remember there being older miniatures where the undead were more wounded looking, like they looked like they'd been killed and then brought back, rather than just I died and I've been brought back.
That's more of a Vampire Counts thing for sure.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
In terms of Tomb Kings, they most of the warriors of Tomb Kings actually died willingly when they were entombed with their king. And then they were risen up by Nagash when he did his whole Nagash thing.
Fair enough.
But they didn't die in battle. That's all zombies, which we don't touch those. Those are gross.
Well, I think the zombies are recently dead. I mean, conceptually, a zombie and a skeleton have been the same thing in other media.
Right.
It's just the longer a zombie hangs around, the less meat it's going to have.
And weirdly, it gets better in combat.
Also experience or something.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
Zombies with experience points. You get skeletons.
I have 3 years experience in being dead.
Well, I mean, there are exceptions, but in the movies, zombies are normally kind of daft.
Yes, slow and shambling.
Yeah. Whereas skeletons have character.
They do. Like, I'm definitely thinking of Army of Darkness here. Anyway, keep going.
I'm looking at you because I think you're the only one who's used the contrast paint for skeletons.
Yes, Skeleton Horde contrast paint from Citadel. It works wonders. I've done a small amount of work with it, but it is amazing what I've done. I bought a can of Wraithspun spray, sprayed up all the models, and then just one coat of Skeleton Horde, and looks amazing.
Done.
Yep, instantly done. I could go over with like a white dry brush if I wanted to brighten it up a little bit, but I think it's good enough.
You're happy
Yeah.
with how it looks?
Took
All right.
5 minutes maybe after priming.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. That's how to paint skeletons. Boom. Done.
Yeah.
Well, it's at least the bones of it anyway.
Haha.
Sorry.
I mean, we're going into greater detail and be here for the next couple of centuries.
Yeah.
Depending on how your time travel devices are working.
Yep.
On things like bandages,
How white the
undead
teeth should be.
clothing. Well, the weapons themselves.
Well, I think from a overall army standpoint, like the bone part is the main part
Yeah,
that differentiates them from other armies, right?
yeah, totally.
When playing Tomb Kings, you're going to be painting way more bone than anything else, including comparing to other armies.
Right.
The second thing you're going to be painting the most is gold,
Right.
because Tomb Kings are bone and gold, and then a color of your choice, essentially.
Right. Typically, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of decorative stuff that wants to be,
It wants to be flashy.
yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of a throwback from throw forward, perhaps. See, when they were alive and in the real world of what we call Chem, or what was called Chem. Chem is the word for Egypt by the ancient Egyptians.
Ah.
Well, that explains some things.
That explains
Okay.
a lot of things. Now, one of their gods happened to have been the sun.
Sure.
So,
Raw.
exactly. Ra is one of the names of the sun gods. I believe Ra is actually the rays of the sun.
Ah.
There's a whole bunch of
Sure.
different names for all the different gods.
Absolutely. Conversely, ancient Chem was a very vibrant civilization that was concerned with life and vibrancy and the Nile, and they probably might be slightly horrified that they're now remembered as this undead menace, but
Yeah.
I think they might see the funny side as well, to be fair.
The reason is that we found this big book, which is just full of dead things, and that's where we got 90% of our stuff from, in the Book of the Dead.
That
Yeah.
and the fact that they wrapped up their
And that's
their
what we
kings.
found.
Yeah.
That was for
ate.
their journey into the afterlife.
Right.
Which would be another vibrant place. I think it was only when you screwed up in life and you were judged unworthy that,
Your heart was eaten and you were cast into the abyss or whatever.
yeah.
Yep.
But
Huh.
yeah, there was blue and gold were
The royal colors.
the
Right.
yeah
And
at
the
the time.
and the blue was from a semi-precious gem called lapis lazuli, which is why it's a very particular color, and why it's so common across. Anytime you see anything Egyptian, it's that blue. It's because it's a mineral, and it that's the natural color of it.
Yeah, you had a few quid if you had blue on.
Yeah, that's right.
You had a few more quid if you had purple.
Right.
A few 100,000 more.
Yeah.
Egyptians actually developed a lot of early goldsmithing techniques. They created a lot of techniques that we still use in some form today, about the finer aspects of goldsmithing and creating jewelry out of it. I did a whole project on this.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's like really interesting because we've got, alongside the goldsmithing and the blue, there's also some like ancient Egyptian, like prehistoric Egypt, where we've got these flint bracelets, which we don't know how they were made. They're nearly perfectly smooth, closed bracelets of flint that we don't know how to make today.
Huh.
And all sorts of other things that we don't really know, because there's so much lost about Egypt.
Of course.
And all we really know for certain is what their religion saw death as, and that's where the Tomb Kings come in.
Right. And even then, it's only like some portion of
Yeah.
it, right?
It's like one book of the Bible.
Because the Egypt, Chem, like it was a dominant culture for, I think, like a couple of thousand years. It was not like 3,000 years or something like that.
3,000 years is about right, yeah.
Yeah. And 3,000 years, when you think about it, like that's us looking back to before the ancient Greeks, right? So pre-Socrates.
About 1,500 years before the ancient Greeks.
Well, no, the ancient Greeks were like 500 BC. So, right. So this is 2,500 years ago. So us looking back to just before the ancient Greeks, that would be like they'd been going for 500 years at that point.
The Egyptians went for a huge amount of time.
I know, it's bonkers. Like it's hard to get your head around.
They were still very influential. I mean, like you say, they were in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Depicted famously as the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like they are in Warhammer now. Is Warhammer the Bible?
No, it's the Book of Armaments. We've already discussed this. Okay, sorry, we should get back on topic. Painting gold was how we got onto this really odd tangent.
Clearly the Tomb King's Arcane Journal is the Bible.
I think that the podcast, considering that we're talking about Tomb Kings, does need a section on Egypt, particularly ancient Egypt.
That's for sure.
So I don't think it's that much of a tangent. But I think
Anyway, gold.
Gold.
Yeah.
Buy gold paint your models gold. Anyway, ancient Egypt, right? No.
I'm gonna start off with this, and you can take it wherever you want to go. I feel like there's a ton of different ways to paint gold, right? Because depending on what color you use for the shade of it. Right. Obviously, the shiny part is still going to be that yellowy color of some sort, but there's so many, different possibilities you have for what you're going to put down first that are going to really, or put over it or whatever, that are really going to affect the overall look of the gold. So, sorry, that's all I had to say.
No, that's a good starting point. I think. I paint metals how God intended us to paint metal, and by God I mean Mike McVie.
Mike McVie, I was about to say
John Blanche. Right.
The heavy metal way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's basically black as an undercoat and dry brushing.
Right.
There's about 50 golds available commercially. I think before painting, obviously you've got to make the decision on what is your gold going to look like? Is this the gold that has been somehow magically protected? Has it been polished over the last few 100 million years that your Tomb King's army has been alive? Or has it been in the murky tomb and no one's paid it that much attention until last Thursday when they get up and said, "Oh, there's a world out there, let's go and kill everyone."
Oops, they're already dead.
I think if I was to paint gold, I'd be doing a brightish gold, but I wouldn't be afraid to darken parts of it down. Now, obviously, starting black, you could say find bolt gun metal or its modern equivalent, or
I think there's lead belcher now in the Citadel range.
yeah,
Right, which is like a medium dark silver.
yeah,
Okay.
very dark silver.
Oh, it's a very dark silver. Okay.
And then
It's about the darkest you can go in silver without it being like not metallic anymore.
Sure. Okay.
you can do as a darker gold. Army Painter has, I think they have weapon bronze, greedy gold, and shining gold. No, shining gold is actually from Old Citadel, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's a very bright, shiny gold. If you wanted to, you could get out your very small brush and edge along the lines in a particular silver. Why you wouldn't want to, because if you're painting a lot of things in gold, particularly edges of shields,
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything metal is going to be either bronze or gold, and it depends if it's a weapon or not. If it's a weapon, it's bronze. Otherwise, it's gold. So you're going to have a lot of edges to highlight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is.
Going to get very painful very fast if you do it on every model.
Well, I think, so I think you kind of have to, you need to know what your tone of gold that you're going for. Because if you go with that black to dark silver to an actual gold paint, you're going to have something that looks kind of like, that's going to look like a ancient kind of antique sort of gold.
Yeah.
Whereas the look that they have in the army book, like if you look at how they've painted them right now, that's not, you couldn't get that effect that way, right? They've got a very kind of rose, almost like a rose gold feel to it, and I think that they have gone through, possibly starting with like a bronze or a copper sort of undertone and gone up from there, to give that. I think they're specifically trying to contrast with the turquoise, right?
Yeah.
Quite a bit. It's just something, when you're painting, think about, like you were saying, Finton, you're going to be painting bone, you're going to be painting gold, and then you got your other color. So your gold, you can actually get a bit of variety in by, how you choose to start it. The bone, as Tim was saying earlier, you can get variety in as much as you want to. I feel like, you're not just limited to, it's going to be a skeleton color, a gold color, and then I the only thing I'm really picking is whether I want to do blue or red or green,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally. I think the other decision you might want to make is, do you want to go gold? Do you want to go a bit mental? You want to have metallic green?
Right.
Because serpents were a thing, and all that glitters,
Sure.
particularly if you're doing your own version.
Your dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to follow one of the serpent gods, go for a nice metallic green.
Yep.
I imagine you can also have some nice with just straight silver on all the gold bits.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I
The
would,
Iron Legion.
well, I would love to see kind of copper with that verdigris kind of look to it. I think that could look really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing is worth pointing out is the Army Painter has strong tone. Citadel has Agrax Earthshade, and there's a lot of other equivalents. If you want to darken down, make your metals a little bit more grubby,
Those are the way to go.
that's one way to go. Or you can just go, hey, what? Null oil.
If in doubt, apply non-oil.
Bottled talent.
Or there's the dark wash from Army Painter. Why you'd want to use the more brown stuff is that it does enrich the gold.
Right.
Why you'd want to use the black stuff is,
It does the opposite.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like I said, these have probably been stuck in a pyramid for,
Some of them have been stuck under the sand for a while.
Yeah.
Under the sand, yeah. And like I was saying earlier, they think that there's Tomb King sort of stuff buried all the way up as far as the Empire. Right.
Yes, I've heard that rumor.
Yeah.
I
So
think that's worth investigating.
Based on some of Cetra's conquests, there's also some stuff buried up as far as Norska.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
At least left there now.
Well, they were the dominant human empire at the time in the Warhammer world, and
for a long time.
yeah, there's evidence that they would have traded all over, and currently in the contemporary background, they're having a go at the Border Princes, which
Yes.
is
They were bringing the dog to heel, I believe, was the...
That's right.
well, the Bretonians have this nasty habit of crusading, particularly when they're not wanted. And I think it's a reference to Napoleon going into Egypt,
Oh yeah, he did that.
and
He failed horribly.
he caused a lot of trouble. He started attacking the noses.
Hang on. Napoleon, caused a lot of trouble. Tim. There we go. That's French history right there.
Well, until Sharp turned up,
That's right.
which would be the best crossover ever, is the Tomb Kings with Sharp some
Against
Bretonian-
Napoleon.
Yeah, against Napoleon, and some Bretonians as well.
Bretonians would hate Napoleon. He uses guns.
That's true.
Except, if you take one of those armies of infamy where you can have the
The Border Princes. Yeah.
princes, that's right. Sharp's rifles are one of those. Just
He's been exiled,
Yeah.
just
okay.
like he was in real life.
I don't even know where the hell we are or what we're talking about right now.
Gold, right?
Right, gold.
Well,
Is there more stuff that we need to talk about?
probably sand.
Sand. Yes, we really should cover that.
How do you
Absolutely.
paint sand?
What you do is you figure out a way of painting sand so it looks kind of realistic and a little bit cartoony, but matches the model 100%. Okay, and then you discover that Armageddon dust exists.
Right.
What is Armageddon dust? I'm discovering it right now, live in our podcast.
Right then. So traditionally, what we'd do is we'd get modelling sand, PVA glue, blah 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 paint. Right.
Yep.
So painting it would, instead of going, the darker brown, you go for a very light brown, perhaps even a bit yellowy, and then dry brush, bleached bone to skull white,
Sure.
which does give you a kind of very sandy colour. And like I say, then you discover that Armageddon dust exists, and you start swearing at your past self. Armageddon dust is a product from Citadel Colour, which is basing stuff in a bottle. It will cane your brush.
Yeah.
Yes.
It will cane your brush. You get some on an old brush, and you slop it on, and mind the feet, and job done.
Yes. So I have never seen the Citadel version. I have used the Vallejo version. It's basically textured paint.
Yeah.
And,
They're called texture paints.
right. And the Vallejo version, and the reason that I bought it and why I've really enjoyed it is because it comes in a huge pot.
Nice.
Like the size of a jam jar. So you can actually base your whole army with it as opposed to, and still have leftovers.
Yeah.
Right.
Base 1.5 armies with it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, let me buy 5 pots for my horde army of skeletons.
Right. Exactly. But okay, so that's good. And it comes in a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different textures.
Yeah.
And yes, I absolutely agree for sand.
And it's cheaper per volume.
Right. And because you can swirl it around, you can make it look kind of like once it dries, it keeps its shape pretty well. But while you're working it while it's wet, you can actually, make footprints in it.
Oh, nice.
You can do all kinds of because it's kind of goopy. But you know what it's like actually? It's like icing. It's got a very similar sort of consistency to icing, so you can make little crests and whatever shapes you want in it, and it's not
Chariot tracks.
Chariot tracks, yes, chariot tracks.
Speaking of other things in the sand, though, I've seen a lot of Tomb King's armies, but a lot of them have very plain bases of just, it's sand, wow.
That's the fast way.
Yes. But I've also seen some nicer looking bases with things on them, and I'm just wondering about, what are some things you can put on bases for Tomb Kings to make them pop a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the obvious one are scarab beetles, right? Because of the tomb swarms. They're kind of flavorful. They also, they're iridescent in real life, right? If you ever see those sorts of beetles, they've got
All sorts of colors.
All sorts of, you literally, whatever color you want to put on there, put it on a beetle, go. There you go. There's my first contribution.
Tim, your turn.
Rocks.
Oh,
you're seeing you're seeing my scarab beetles with some rocks.
No, I'm not.
I don't think that's an equal bet. I think you got to raise it a little bit more.
Just a little bit.
No, but fair. Rocks is fair. Let's talk about rocks first, and then
let's not talk about rocks. Let's talk about.
We'll have a rock episode later.
Let's talk about. Let's talk. What's Renadra?
No.
Why not?
It's a funny word.
They do paved bases.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Like for cities and things? And for like cobbled streets and things?
Yeah, and you can imagine perhaps dungeon tiled bases.
Of course, yeah.
Right. You can also get them from a number of other places like micro art studios.
Yep.
There's that chap in Waterford who does 3D printed bases.
Yep.
Corvus.
Yep. And there's the rollers.
Yep.
But what would you have it look like for a Tomb King's army, do you think?
Right. So sticking with the Renadra stuff, and this is pure fantasy. I've not done this, but it's it would look interesting if you wanted me to raise you.
Yeah.
I'm going all in, right?
All right, go all in.
So you have part of the base in sand, part of the base this ancient cobblestone. So they have gotten out of the earth just as these Bretonians are invading, and they're climbing out of the sand as if to say, who's making all that noise up there? I'm trying to sleep, right? Then this horse comes along, boots one of the skeletons in the head. Right? His skull goes flying off into the distance, and the Bretonian thinks he's all clever until the rest of the army gets up. So it turns out that just underneath the sand is a city.
Sure.
So you use half Armageddon dust or the stuff from Vallejo.
Yeah.
Half cobblestone bases.
And it makes it look like you're literally coming arise from the sands.
Absolutely. I mean,
beneath the ancient sands, the mighty legions come.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have a fraction of them just pure sand. You can have a fraction of them on the stones.
Yep.
You can have half and half, quarters, whatever. Now, if you put in together the army, you are going to have extra skulls.
As we have previously mentioned.
So perhaps some skulls. If you're getting the sprue...
Heard you liked skeletons, so we put more skeletons on your skeleton.
Absolutely. If you're getting the undead skeleton sprue from Mantic, they have a gravestone and a skeleton popping out model.
Nice.
So you could partially assemble that. So you don't actually need the gravestone because it's not marked, but you could have the half skeleton coming out of a hole in the ground, spear in one hand, shield in the other.
Nice. All right. I will see your Reneja cobblestone mixed with sand, and I will raise you the I think it's called the River Mortis, which is the river that runs through Nehekara. So it's not the Nile, but it's the Nile.
Denial.
Sure, it's not denial, indeed. So when Nagash did his big dark ritual and made everything dead in the land of Nehekara, the river turned from being this lush thing that provided life everywhere to being this river of blood. And very biblical, the river runs red with blood. It still runs through there, kind of like the river in the Terry Pratchett books. It's like very sludgy and gross. But I could absolutely see kind of like banks of the River Mortis bases where you've got like this sort of blood, riverbank kind of basing theme, and a display board that is literally on the banks of the river, and it feels like because you could go with some more colors than just the plain sand color. You could, but it would still be earth tones, which I think is always important for your bases because you don't want to detract from your models too much.
Yeah.
But all right, that's my best effort. Is
You
the
can stick
River
some
Mortis.
fish skeletons on there.
Yeah, fish skeletons, or things, because it's more muddy than necessarily sandy. You've got some possible options about stuff being covered. Actually, stuff being covered. Crocodiles, yes, skeleton crocodiles would be cool.
What else would be cool is that if they're coming over the river, they could just be coming out of the river as well.
Right.
So you could take the idea of the skeleton popping out of the ground.
Yeah.
Or even you could just chop off some legs of some models if you're feeling morbid.
Right.
And just have them knee deep in the water.
Or the back wheels of your chariot,
Yeah.
right? Just a half of the wheel kind of coming out. Okay, hippos. Could we get some undead hippos? Is that a thing that could happen?
Undead crocodile dragons are on the table, so I don't see why not.
Undead hippos.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'll have a word with a friend of mine.
See if you can go kill some hippos in Egypt for a while.
I think after that remark, I'm going to be put on a list.
No, it's okay. It's a business expense.
Once again, I'm the one saying the terrible things.
Fair enough.
I'm going to get in so much trouble for this episode.
Yeah. But
All right.
I mean, the other way you could take it is coming off bases for a while is sticking with the classical theme. If you know someone who owned a lizard man army, you could nick some of their weapons and banners because there's a similar pantheon. And in the real world, there was definitely evidence of trading between the classical empires of South America and some of the African civilizations as well. Whether you want to kind of do a deep dive into that, that's up to you. But clearly, the ancient world had really enjoyed making big triangles out of rock.
Right.
And
Yes.
we don't know who came up with it first, but somebody clearly went to the other place and went, do you know, it'd be a really good idea. We should have that in our back garden, just like when we went on holiday.
And then conspiracy theorists can use this to say that they had spaceships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a good idea, right? Some of the iconography from the Lizardmen, especially if you clip a few bits here and there and stick them together in interesting ways, and then paint them gold instead of copper, right? To paint them, you can absolutely get some unique looks.
Yeah. I mean, you could use it to help theme your Tomb King's army, or you could create a human civilization that was wiped out, perhaps, by the lizard men.
Tomb Kings of Lustria, yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps if they ever introduce Lizardmen back into the mainline factions, we can see more of that.
Maybe.
Only time will tell.
All right, men. Rank up. We'll charge them in the flanks.
And that's the end of the first part of our faction focus on Tomb Kings. Join us in the next episode where we will take a look at all the different units in the army roster. Thanks for listening.